The night my daughter's future in-laws sat at our dinner table and said in Spanish that she was a little simple, not knowing I understood every word, I had a choice. I could stay quiet the way I'd been staying quiet for years, or I could finally remember who I used to be. I chose to wait, and then, about an hour later, I chose something else entirely. My name is Patricia Vance. I'm 61 years old, 3 years divorced, and for most of the past decade, I had been doing a very convincing impression of a woman who no longer needed much. That night in Canmore changed that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. At 24, fresh out of university in Vancouver with a Spanish literature degree and no sensible plan, I bought a one-way ticket to Spain. My mother called it madness. My father said nothing, which in his language meant the same thing. I ended up in Seville, not Madrid. I arrived during Semana Santa and remember standing on a cobblestone street at midnight while a candle-lit procession moved past in total silence. Hundreds of people, footsteps, orange blossom in the dark. I had never felt so foreign in my life, and I had never felt so awake. I'd meant to stay 3 months. I stayed 7 years. I learned Spanish from the market woman on Calle Feria, who corrected my grammar while selling me bruised tomatoes, and from the regulars at the tapas bar where I worked, men in their 60s who treated my accent as a community project. Rosario, the owner, told me after 3 months that my Spanish was acceptable. 2 years later, she said I sounded like someone from the neighborhood. I went home and cried both times, for different reasons. Then I met Daniel. He was a project manager from Edmonton, in Seville on contract, and we met in a cafe near the cathedral during a hard rain. He was trying to read a menu with the panic of a man who had studied no Spanish whatsoever. When the waiter left, Daniel looked up and said, "I have just accidentally ordered something that I sincerely hope is not what I think it is." I laughed. He looked relieved. We talked until the rain stopped. He extended his contract, then extended it again. When he finally had to go back to Canada, he asked me to come with him. I said yes. That first winter back in Alberta was harder than I admitted. The light was wrong. The streets were too wide and too quiet. I told myself it was adjustment. Eventually, Emma was born, and I became Patricia Vance, wife, mother, teacher, a woman in suburban Alberta whose Spanish lived quietly in paperbacks, weekend television, and the occasional sentence I murmured to myself in the garden. The Seville years started to feel like something that had happened to someone louder. The divorce came after 28 years. Some things erode so slowly you don't notice the damage until the structure is already compromised. Daniel had been distant for years, and I had been polite about it in that particularly Canadian way, never raising my voice, never making a scene, just quietly accepting less and less until there was almost nothing left to accept. He'd had a way, toward the end, of responding to things I said with a particular silence, not hostile, just absent, as if the words had arrived in a frequency he'd stopped being able to hear. I used to practice how I would phrase things before I said them to him, hoping that the right construction might land differently. It never did. And at some point I stopped trying, which I told myself was acceptance, and which I now understand was something else entirely. When he told me he'd met someone else, the strangest part was how unsurprised I felt. Emma was 27 by then, already established as an interior designer in Calgary. She'd been with Mateo Salas for 2 years, a civil engineer, Colombian Spanish on his mother's side, born and raised in Bogotá. I'd only met him twice before he proposed, but he was quiet and careful in his speech, and genuinely kind when he looked at my daughter, and that was enough for me. The engagement was in March. By June, Mateo's parents had flown in from Bogotá, his mother Carmen and his father Rodrigo, spending 2 weeks in Canada before gathering at a rented lake house near Canmore for a long weekend where both families would meet properly for the first time. Emma called me 3 weeks beforehand. She was trying to sound casual. She wasn't quite managing it. "Mom, I really want this to go well." A pause. "Carmen can be intense. You'll see what I mean when you meet her, but she notices things. Everything, kind of." "What sort of things?" "Just things. Like she'll notice if a wine glass is the wrong shape for the varietal. That kind of noticing." Another pause. "Rodrigo is the same. They're very cultured. They've traveled everywhere, like everywhere. She listed places quickly: Rome, Lisbon, Tokyo, Istanbul. "Rodrigo speaks 3 languages, Carmen 4. "Emma, I just want everyone to feel comfortable." "I'll do my best. And maybe don't be too, you know how you sometimes undersell yourself? Like you'll say you used to work in education and leave it at that? Maybe just fill it in a bit so they get a fuller picture." She said it kindly, carefully, with all the love in the world, and it hit me somewhere I hadn't expected. I told her I'd fill it in. We talked for another 10 minutes about logistics, what time I should arrive, whether to bring anything, what Emma was cooking. At the end, she said, "Also, Pico's coming. Don't make that face." "I'm not making a face." "You are in your heart." Pico was her small green conure. Emma loved him with the kind of seriousness other people reserve for blood relatives. By the end, she sounded lighter. The worry filed down to a manageable size. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a while. The afternoon was quiet. Red Deer quiet, which is a very complete kind of quiet if you let it in. I thought about what she'd said. Maybe just fill it in a bit. The careful worry behind it. My daughter was nervous on my behalf. Nervous that I wouldn't be enough for these people she needed to like her. Nervous that I might show up as the version of me I'd been for the last 3 years. The reduced version. The one who had learned to take up less space so that everyone around her could take up more. I wasn't angry at Emma for it. That was the worst part. She wasn't wrong. The drive up to Canmore was 3.5 hours from Red Deer on a clear Friday afternoon, the Rockies building slowly at the edge of the sky, the way they always do. First suggestions, then certainties, then walls. I stopped once for gas outside of Cochrane, stood beside my car in the wind and looked west at the mountains and tried to remember the last time I'd felt fully like myself in a room full of strangers. I couldn't quite place it. I had changed my outfit 3 times that morning. The first choice felt too casual. The second felt like I was trying too hard. The third, a dark green wrap dress Emma had given me 2 birthdays ago, felt like something I could live with. I'd started playing the Spanish radio station I kept in my presets. Then, about 20 minutes into the drive, I turned it off. I noticed that I'd turned it off. I noticed why. The singer had rolled an R in a way that pulled something up from the back of my throat. Not sadness exactly, recognition. For a second I was 26 again, standing on a rooftop in Triana with a plastic cup of bad wine in my hand, while the whole block shouted at a football match on someone's tiny television. I had shouted too, loudly, badly. without checking whether anyone approved of the sound of me. I remembered the feeling of that voice in my body. Then I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. Lipstick checked twice, earrings chosen because they were modest, the neckline of my dress adjusted at a gas station because I suddenly worried it was trying too hard. I had not become quiet all at once. You give up one sentence, then another. You decide not to mention a thing because it would take too long to explain. You let a room have its idea of you because correcting it feels vain. Eventually, the room stops being wrong. You have helped it. I drove another 10 miles in silence before I turned the radio back on. Then I turned it off again. I stopped at the Cochrane liquor store and bought a Malbec. I'd heard Colombians sometimes preferred it, which was either thoughtful or embarrassingly obvious, and I stood in the aisle too long deciding which, and then brought it to the register without resolving it. The bottle cost $47, more than I'd intended. I said a small prayer in the car before I pulled back onto the highway, not for things to go well, just for the grace to handle them either way. The lake house sat at the foot of the Rockies, the kind of place that costs more per weekend than most people's monthly groceries. Pine and glass and a long deck that jutted out over the lake, a row of firewood stacked with architectural precision. The kind of rental that has a separate wine fridge and folded robes in the bathrooms. I arrived to find Matteo already there, unloading something from his car. He lifted a hand in greeting, his quiet smile. A small, covered bird cage sat on the bench inside the mudroom. Emma was in the kitchen, her face flushed with warmth, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She'd been cooking since morning. Carmen and Rodrigo had arrived an hour earlier. Carmen came out to greet me as I was pulling my bag from the car. Tall, impeccably dressed even for a mountain weekend, tailored dark trousers, a silk blouse in deep cream, gold jewelry understated and clearly expensive. She pressed both cheeks to mine and said, in English with a light accent, "Patricia, we have heard so much. Welcome." Her smile was warm in the way professional warmth is warm, technically present, not quite reaching the eyes. Rodrigo appeared behind her, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who holds a wine glass by the stem without thinking about it. He shook my hand with both of his, the kind of handshake that is itself a form of assessment, a weighing. "Patricia, welcome. The drive, not too difficult?" "Beautiful, actually. The mountains are extraordinary this time of year." "They are impressive," he agreed. A small pause. "More vertical than I expected. We have height in Bogotá. We are 2,600 meters, but not quite this. This is very dramatic. The Andes are quite something themselves, from what I understand." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "You know them?" "Not well. I spent some time in Cartagena years ago, and briefly in Medellin." A small recalibration, something behind the eyes adjusting. "What brought you there?" "I was traveling after university. I ended up going further south than I'd planned. I have a habit of that." He smiled, polite, assessing, still filing me away in a category that hadn't quite resolved. "And now, you live in Red Deer?" "I do, for many years." "And before?" "Before, various places." I smiled. "Shall we go in? I've been looking forward to meeting you properly." "Not yet. I wasn't ready yet." Inside, Carmen was already in the kitchen beside Emma, leaning over the counter to examine something Emma had prepared. Her posture was the posture of a woman forming an opinion. "The lamb smells wonderful," she was saying. "You roasted it yourself?" "Slow roasted," Emma said, pleased. 6 hours, sort of my mom's recipe, adapted a bit." "Lovely," A considered pause. We prepare ours quite differently, of course. More spice, different herbs. But this... She straightened slightly, tilted her head. This is very Canadian, very clean, simple. Emma beamed. She took it as a compliment. Matteo, standing by the sink with a towel over one shoulder, did not. He glanced at his mother, then at Emma, then down at the knife in his hand. It was quick enough that anyone could miss it. I almost did. "It has rosemary," Emma said, still smiling, "and garlic, and lemon zest." "Of course," Carmen said, "very fresh." The word fresh did the same work simple had done. It sounded kind if you needed it to. Emma needed it too. I set my wine bottle on the counter and smiled at nothing in particular. Rodrigo appeared beside me, opening a drawer he seemed to know the location of already. He produced a corkscrew. Then he paused and looked at the wine I'd set down. "A Malbec," he said. "I thought you might enjoy it." "We brought wine as well." He said it gently, not unkindly. He set my Malbec to the side and brought out the bottles he and Carmen had carried from Bogotá. Argentine, both of them. From a producer I recognized. Quite good, a cut above what I'd chosen. "Better save yours for another time," he said, with a smile that had no malice in it at all. "Of course," I said. He uncorked one of his bottles with practiced ease. We had drinks on the deck before dinner. The evening light was doing extraordinary things to the peaks, turning them copper and then gold. Carmen stood at the railing with her wine and looked at the mountains in the particular way of someone who has seen enough beautiful things that beauty itself has become a comparative exercise. "Extraordinary," she said. "It really is," Emma said. "The mountains in the Dolomites are quite different," Carmen said. "More sculptural, more European, I suppose. The stone is a different color entirely." She turned back. "But this has its own quality, a kind of wildness." "We think of it as peaceful," Matteo said mildly. His parents didn't seem to register the mild. Emma did. She looked at him for half a second, the way couples look when one person is trying to put a hand on a hot stove without anyone noticing. Matteo gave her a small smile. It said, "I'm handling it." He wasn't, of course. None of us were. I sat slightly apart, nursing a glass of BC Riesling, my own wine being elsewhere for another time. Rodrigo settled into the chair beside me. He asked about my work, and I explained about the school, the 19 years teaching Spanish. He nodded in the way people do when a piece of information has been received and filed under "not very interesting." "Secondary school," he said. "That must be rewarding." "It has its moments." "Of course." He took a sip of his wine, looked at the mountains. "And Emma, she's been doing interior design for some years now?" "Since she graduated." "She has good taste," he said carefully. "A natural instinct. Not everyone has that." "No. She's always had a gift for seeing what belongs together." He nodded. We both looked at the mountains. Then he said in Spanish to Carmen, in a voice that wasn't particularly quiet, "She seems nice. The mother. Reserved." Carmen answered, also in Spanish, without looking away from the view. "Quiet women often are. They mean well." I took a sip of my Riesling. "Teachers," Rodrigo said, still in Spanish, "are very important, of course. Very dedicated people." A pause, just barely long enough. "Yes," Carmen agreed. They moved on to something else, a restaurant in Calgary they'd visited the previous week. I smiled when Matteo said something to me and answered when Emma asked if I needed anything. I was perfectly pleasant. I gave them no indication of any kind. Inside my chest, something was becoming very still and very deliberate. The first Spanish exchange I caught that truly mattered came while Emma had gone inside to check on dinner. Mateo was refilling glasses. Carmen said, in Spanish, that the lake house was charming, if perhaps a bit rustic for her taste. Rodrigo agreed that Canadians had a particular fondness for nature as a substitute for culture. They seemed to believe that proximity to something wild counted for something in terms of character formation. Dismissive, but not malicious, the kind of thing people say when they believe they're speaking in privacy, and the privacy makes them honest in ways they would not otherwise be. I took a sip of my wine. Then Mateo returned, and Carmen touched his arm and said, still in Spanish, "She seems sweet, your Emma. A little simple in her tastes, maybe, but good-natured." She glanced toward the door where Emma had just disappeared. "The important thing is that she makes you happy." Mateo replied in Spanish that Emma absolutely made him happy, and that he would appreciate it if his mother didn't describe the woman he intended to marry as simple. Carmen waved a hand. "I meant it as a compliment. Simple is honest. Simple is pure." Mateo's jaw moved once. Rodrigo noticed. He gave his son a quick look, not angry exactly, more like a warning not to make the evening heavier than it needed to be. That look told me something useful. This was not the first time Mateo had swallowed something for the sake of keeping a room intact. I kept my face perfectly still. For 30 years, I had let people believe I was just the quiet one, the one who smiled and refilled glasses and asked follow-up questions and never, ever made things uncomfortable. I had been very good at it, apparently convincing enough that even my daughter worried on my behalf. I told myself, not yet. The right moment hadn't come. Dinner was Emma's slow-roasted lamb, beautifully done, the kind of dish that fills a room with something that smells like effort and love. She'd spent 3 days on the recipe. Rodrigo complimented it warmly, and his warmth was genuine, I'll give him that. Then he asked about my work again, more carefully this time, as if he hadn't quite finished his assessment from earlier. I answered. He nodded. I watched him decide I'd told him everything important. Then he leaned toward Carmen and said, low but not low enough, in Spanish, that he understood now why the daughter was a little unpolished. The mother seemed kind, but she was not someone who had ever really seen much of the world. I set down my fork very carefully on the edge of my plate. Carmen replied that it wasn't a criticism. Plenty of people lived quiet, small lives and were perfectly content. She said it gently, the tone you use for an observation that is merely factual, a verdict delivered in what she believed was a sealed room. Emma looked up. She had caught something, not the words, but the particular quality of the silence that follows a sentence you don't know you've heard. "Everything okay down there?" "Wonderful," I said. "The wine is lovely." My hand on the glass was completely steady. I was quite proud of that. Carmen returned to her lamb. The conversation moved. I answered questions, asked others, smiled at the right moments. I was a very pleasant dinner companion. I was very quiet. And then Rodrigo said to Carmen, still in Spanish, that he only hoped Mateo wouldn't spend his married life carrying a wife with no real roots, no real cultural foundation. He wanted grandchildren who knew where they came from. I looked at him across the table. He was looking at Carmen. Neither of them had any idea. Emma excused herself to bring out dessert. Mateo followed to help. Their voices disappeared into the kitchen. Emma laughed at something, that laugh she's had since she was 4, the one that holds nothing back. Carmen said something to Rodrigo about the wine. Perfectly ordinary. He answered. They seemed satisfied. I sat with my hands in my lap and I thought. My pulse was in my wrists. Not fast, hard. I thought about Daniel saying, "You don't need to impress people," and how, over years, that had come to mean something closer to, "Please don't try." I thought about all the small edits that had become automatic. An opinion softened, a story skipped, a correction left unsaid because it would make everyone look at me. Almost. I looked at Rodrigo, who was still talking to Carmen about something entirely unrelated. He was mid-sentence, something about cultural foundations, about knowing where you come from, and I felt the sentence coming to its end, and I waited for the silence at the end of it. And when the silence came, I set down my wine glass and I said, in Spanish, in the particular Sevillano accent I had spent 7 years earning in bars and markets and streets that tourists never found. Qué curioso escuchar eso en mi propia mesa. How curious to hear that at my own table. Rodrigo stopped mid-breath, not immediately. There was a half-second where the momentum of the sentence simply continued into the air and then ran out, and then there was nothing. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Carmen's head turned toward me, slowly, the way something turns when it cannot quite process what it has registered. I held Rodrigo's gaze and waited. Nobody spoke. The fire popped. Somewhere in the kitchen, a drawer opened and closed. Emma's voice muffled, something to Mateo about where she'd put the serving spoon. Carmen blinked, once. Rodrigo's glass descended very carefully back to the table. He started. He stopped. He didn't finish. More silence. Carmen's eyes were moving between us. Her face was still arranged in something close to its usual composure, but the arrangement was taking visible effort. Rodrigo tried again, slower, careful. You speak Spanish. I do. I unfolded my hands from my lap and laid them flat on the table in front of me. My heart was hammering. My voice was level. I lived in Seville for 7 years. I learned the language there, from the people who lived there, from the bars and the markets and the streets, not from a book. Carmen said, barely above a whisper, "How much did you understand?" Everything. I looked at her steadily, from the cottage being rustic, to my daughter being a little simple, to your concern about your son carrying a wife with no real cultural foundation. A pause. The provincial life, the quiet women, the grandchildren who should know where they come from. Carmen's composure held. It held the way something holds when it is working very hard. Rodrigo looked at the table. I waited a moment, and then I said, still in Spanish, "I'm not going to tell Emma what you said. That is not what this is. But there are things that need to be said before she comes back, and I would like to say them now." I folded my hands. My daughter is not simple. She is direct. There is a difference, and it is an important one. She says what she means because she was raised to believe that honesty is a form of respect. She is one of the most genuinely curious people I know. She reads widely, travels when she can, teaches herself things simply because she wants to understand how the world works. The fact that she doesn't perform sophistication the way you might be accustomed to doesn't mean it isn't there. It means she hasn't decided to perform it. Rodrigo opened his mouth. I held up one hand gently. He closed it. As for me? Yes. I lived in Red Deer and taught secondary school for 19 years. Before that, I was a wife and a mother. And before any of that, I was 24 years old, and I moved to Spain alone with almost nothing, and I built a life in Seville that would probably surprise you. I know that city the way you know Bogotá. I worked in a bar on the Alameda, where the owner told me my Spanish was an embarrassment the first week and perfectly good by Easter. And I waited tables and mopped floors and learned the language from the inside out. I paused. I left because I fell in love. I stayed away because I was raising a family. I let that chapter go quiet because it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. I am telling you this not to impress you. I am telling you because the opinion you've formed tonight is based on an incomplete picture, and it affects my daughter. The kitchen sounds had shifted, quieter now. Were they coming back? I looked at Rodrigo. He was very still. Your son loves a woman who is honest and hardworking and genuinely kind. Those qualities are not simple. They are rare. I would very much appreciate it if, going forward, you extended her the same generosity of judgment I am extending to you right now. A sound from the kitchen. Emma's voice, muffled and too bright. Okay, don't judge me. He was screaming in the mudroom. Then she appeared in the doorway with the flan in both hands and Pico perched on her shoulder. Mateo came in behind her with dessert plates tucked against his chest. Pico turned his green head, looked at the table, and said very clearly, Hi! For one strange second, the room breathed again. Emma laughed. It was quick, nervous, almost grateful. He knows when he's being excluded, she said. Mateo set the plates down. He was threatening legal action. Pico climbed from Emma's shoulder to Mateo's sleeve. Emma looked at me, then at Carmen, then at Rodrigo. Her smile faded. What happened? No one answered fast enough. That was the answer. Rodrigo looked down at the table. Carmen's face was still composed, but barely. Mateo saw it. He saw me. Then he saw his parents. Mama, he said. Not loud. Enough. Carmen's fingers tightened around her fork. Your mother understood more than we realized, she said to Emma. Emma went still. What does that mean? It means we owe you an apology, Carmen said. The room went flat again. No one moved toward the flan. No one knew how to sit normally. Then Pico stepped onto Mateo's shoulder and tried to bite the button on his shirt. Emma caught him with one hand. No, don't eat the groom. Mateo let out a breath that almost became a laugh. Rodrigo smiled because he needed somewhere to put his face. Carmen looked at the bird. So this is the parrot, she said. Conure, Emma said, technically. Of course. Carmen's voice was tired now, not sharp. And this creature also travels with you? Emma held Pico close to her chest. Sometimes. Carmen nodded once. In Spanish, almost under her breath, she said, Another complication. She becomes attached to things very intensely. She did not yet know what that sentence would cost her. Then she coughed. Once. She lifted a hand to her mouth. Excuse me. No one reacted. People cough. Mateo brushed a tiny feather from his sleeve. Carmen coughed again. This time it lasted longer. Rodrigo looked over. Are you all right? Yes. She cleared her throat. The wine, perhaps. She reached for her glass and took a sip. Her eyes had started to water. Emma noticed first. Carmen? I'm fine. Carmen blinked quickly. Something in my eye. She smiled. It was the same smile from the driveway, technically present, assembled under pressure.
Pico hopped from Mateo's shoulder to the back of Carmen's chair. "Pico, no!" Emma said. She moved toward him. Carmen turned her head away and coughed into her fist. A dry cough, then another. Pico fluffed himself. "Come here," Emma said, keeping her voice gentle. The bird stepped onto her hand. She brought him to her chest. Carmen rubbed at one eye with her knuckle. The eye was red now. Mateo stood. "Mama." "I'm all right." She was still trying to be pleasant. That was the frightening part. She tried to inhale and caught halfway. Not dramatic, not choking. Just a small failure of breath that everyone in the room heard. Rodrigo stood too fast. His knee hit the table. Wine jumped in 2 glasses. "Carmen?" "It's nothing," she said. Then she coughed again and could not stop. Emma moved immediately. "I'm taking Pico out." No panic, no apology. She turned and walked quickly to the mudroom with the bird held close, speaking to him under her breath. Mateo was already beside his mother. "Sit forward," he said. "Mama, sit forward." "I am sitting." "Forward." She obeyed him. Rodrigo picked up her water glass, then put it down, then picked it up again. "Maybe tea," he said. "Hot tea. Sometimes it opens—" "No tea," Mateo said. Rodrigo looked at him, offended by instinct, then saw his son's face and stopped. Carmen's breathing had changed, still coming in, still going out, but tighter, audible if you were close enough. I went to her other side. "Carmen," I said, "do you have asthma?" She shook her head. "Any allergies?" Another shake. "Not that I know of," she managed. "Birds?"
She tried to answer and coughed instead. Rodrigo started talking. "She has never reacted to birds. We have been in houses, at friends' homes. Once there was an aviary in—" "Rodrigo," Mateo said, "I'm explaining. Stop explaining." The words came out sharp. Rodrigo stopped. Emma came back without Pico. Her hands were empty. She had tied her hair back with an elastic I had not seen her take from her wrist. "He's in his travel cage in my car," she said. "I started the heat." She looked at Carmen, then at me. "What do you need?" "Antihistamine if you have it," I said, "and call 911 if Mateo hasn't." "I'm calling," Mateo said. His phone was already in his hand. "No ambulance," Carmen said. It came out thin. "Yes, ambulance," Mateo said. He put the phone to his ear. Rodrigo moved toward the sideboard as if there might be something useful there. His hip hit the table again. This time his glass tipped. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth. He grabbed for it and caught the stem too late. Carmen startled and reached for the edge of the cloth, maybe to stop the spill, maybe to steady herself. The fabric pulled under her hand. A plate slid, tipped, and hit the floor with a hard crack. Everyone froze for half a second. Then the room changed completely. No culture, no manners, no performance. Just glass, wine, breath, and people moving. "Leave it," I said. Rodrigo bent anyway. "Leave it," Mateo snapped. "Dad, up." Rodrigo straightened. His face was open now, frightened, useless with it. Emma came back from the kitchen with a blister pack and a glass of water. "Cetirizine," she said, "and Benadryl. Which one?" "Can you swallow?" I asked Carmen. Carmen nodded, though she looked angry that the question had to be asked. "Cetirizine," I said. "One, small sip." Emma pushed the pill into her palm, handed it to me, then held the water near Carmen's hand without crowding her. "Slow," Emma said. Carmen took it. She swallowed. Then she coughed hard enough that her whole body folded around it. Rodrigo made a sound, not a word. Mateo turned away from the phone. "They want to know if her lips are blue." "No," Emma said immediately. She was looking, not guessing. Is she wheezing? I leaned closer. Carmen tried to pull back. I'm just listening, I said. She let me. A little, I told Mateo. He repeated it into the phone. Emma knelt to pick up the larger pieces of plate. Leave it, Rodrigo said, finding his voice too late. I'm not stepping over it with bare ankles, she said. No edge, just fact. She put the pieces on a napkin and moved them aside. Then she wiped wine from the floor where Carmen's shoes were slipping. Simple, I thought. God help them. This was what they had called simple. Carmen's eyes were streaming now. Her blouse was stained with wine where the tablecloth had slapped against her. A strand of hair had come loose from the clip at the back of her head and stuck to her cheek. She knew how she looked. You could see that she knew. It was almost unbearable to watch. She tried to fix the strand of hair and missed. Emma saw. She did not make a fuss of it. She handed Carmen a clean napkin. Here. Carmen took it and pressed it to her eyes. I'm sorry, Emma said. Carmen looked at her over the napkin. For the bird, Emma said. Carmen shook her head. Breath in, breath out. Work. No, she said. No. Mateo stayed on the phone with emergency services, one hand on the back of his mother's chair. His voice was calm in a way I had not heard from him before. She's conscious, breathing is tight, possible allergic reaction to bird exposure. We removed the bird. She took cetirizine, no swelling that we can see, no blue lips. Address is… He looked around. None of us knew the rental address. Emma did. She gave it without hesitation. Rodrigo stood beside the table holding the useless water glass. I should get her purse, he said. Yes, Mateo said. Find her health card. Any medications. Bring the purse here. Rodrigo moved. Having a task helped him. He came back with the purse, opened it, and immediately looked lost inside the neat compartments of his wife's life. Lipstick, passport wallet, a folded receipt, a small silver pill case he could not open because his hands were damp. Emma took it from him. Here, she said. She did not make him feel stupid. That was the kindness of it. I pulled a chair closer and sat in front of Carmen, not touching her. Look at me, I said. She did. In through the nose if you can. Out slowly. She tried. Good. It wasn't good. It was better than panic. Again. Emma stood behind her, one hand hovering near Carmen's shoulder but not landing. She looked at me. I nodded once. Emma set her hand very lightly between Carmen's shoulder blades. Carmen stiffened. Then she let it stay. The siren came 7 minutes later. It felt like 40. The paramedics were young and practical and completely unimpressed by the emotional history of the room. That helped. They asked questions. Mateo answered most of them. Carmen answered when she could. Rodrigo tried to answer over both of them twice and stopped the second time because Mateo looked at him. They checked Carmen's oxygen, listened to her chest, gave her a mask for a few minutes and medication through a small nebulizer that made the room smell faintly chemical. Carmen hated every second of it, not because it hurt, because she could not be elegant with a plastic mask strapped over her face and mascara under one eye. She kept trying to sit straighter. The mask pulled when she moved. The paramedic told her to relax her shoulders, and Carmen gave the smallest nod, the kind a person gives when they understand an instruction and resent needing it. I stood beside her chair and held the slack of the tubing so it did not pull against her cheek. Emma stood near the kitchen with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching the paramedic's hands. Mateo stood at the back of Carmen's chair. Rodrigo stood by the fireplace, holding Carmen's purse against his chest like a borrowed infant. No one laughed. No one made it lighter. The older paramedic, whose name tag said Loom, listened to Carmen's lungs again. "Air movement is better," she said. "Still tight, but better." Carmen closed her eyes. "Do I need hospital?" "We recommend evaluation if symptoms return or worsen. Right now you're responding. We'll monitor a bit longer." Carmen nodded. Her hand found the edge of the tablecloth and gripped it. I put my hand over hers. She looked at it, then at me. I expected her to pull away. She didn't. After 20 more minutes, the paramedics packed up. They told us what to watch for. They told us not to bring the bird back into the house. They told Carmen to avoid further exposure until she had spoken with a doctor. They used calm voices and ordinary words, and the crisis, which had seemed to fill the entire lake house, began shrinking back into something that had happened. When the door closed behind them, the silence was worse than the siren. Carmen sat in the chair with her blouse stained, her hair half down, her face bare in patches where the tears and mask had disturbed her makeup. Rodrigo set her purse on the table. "Carmen," he said. She lifted one hand. "Not now." He stopped. Mateo took the broken plate pieces from the napkin and carried them to the garbage. Emma wiped the last of the wine from the floor. I went to the hall closet, found a folded blanket, and placed it around Carmen's shoulders. She held it closed. "There is wine on me," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "A little. A lot." "Yes," I said. "A lot." She almost smiled. Almost. "I have another blouse upstairs," she said. "I'll help you." Rodrigo took one step forward. Carmen looked at him. He stopped again. "Patricia," she said. So I helped her stand. She was steadier than I expected and weaker than she wanted anyone to know. Emma moved toward us. "Do you need—" "Stay here," Carmen said. Then, softer, "Please." Emma nodded. I walked Carmen up the stairs with one hand near her elbow, but not holding it unless she needed me. Halfway up, she paused and breathed through her nose the way I had told her. "Good," I said. "Do not say good to me like I am a child." "All right." 2 more steps. "But it was good," she said. "I know." She made a small sound that could have been irritation or almost laughter. In the bedroom, Carmen stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself. The blouse was ruined. Her hair had collapsed on one side. Her eyes were red. The fine line of foundation along her jaw had been broken by tears and oxygen and the back of her own hand. For the first time that night, she seemed not powerful at all. "I have wipes," she said. "Small bag, blue." I found them in her suitcase. Her hands were shaking just enough for both of us to notice. She wiped under one eye and missed half of it. "May I?" She hesitated, then handed me the wipe. I cleaned the streak from beneath her eye, then the other side. "I spent a long time," she said, "learning how to never be looked down on again." She looked at me in the mirror. "That is not an excuse." "No, but it is true. I believe you." She swallowed. I confused refinement with character. The sentence cost her more than any apology she had made downstairs. She changed into a soft gray cardigan and left her hair loose. She looked at the clip in her hand, then set it on the dresser. "I don't have the energy." "Then leave it." Downstairs, Mateo's voice said, "Dad, sit down for a minute." Carmen looked toward the door. "He talks when he is afraid." I noticed. "It is unbearable." "A little." This time she smiled. Downstairs, the table looked like the aftermath of a much larger event. The stained cloth had been removed, the plates were stacked, the broken one was gone. Emma had wiped the floor twice and left the wet towel folded by the sink. Mateo stood at the counter making tea no one had asked for. Rodrigo sat at the far end of the table, both hands around a glass of water. He looked up when Carmen entered. His face did something complicated. Relief first, then guilt. Then the old reflex, the need to comment, manage, restore. "You look—" Mateo turned from the counter. Rodrigo closed his mouth. Carmen sat down. "I look terrible," she said. Rodrigo stared at her. Emma looked down quickly. Carmen saw that too. "It's all right," she said. "I have looked better." The room let out one careful breath. Mateo brought her tea. "No birds," he said. "No birds," she agreed. Emma's mouth tightened. "He's in my car," she said. "I called a motel near the highway. They take birds if they're caged." "You are leaving?" Carmen asked. "Pico can't stay here." "No," Carmen said. "He can't." Emma nodded once, like she had expected that to be the whole conversation. "I'll get my bag." "Emma," Carmen said. Emma stopped. Carmen's voice was still rough. "That is a practical problem. It does not mean you need to disappear." Emma did not turn around right away. Mateo set his phone on the counter. "I booked the room," he said. "I'll take Pico. I'll stay there with him." "Mateo—" "I'm not asking." Rodrigo looked at his son. For once, he didn't correct the tone. "I'll drive you," Rodrigo said. Mateo looked at him. "If you want," Rodrigo added. That was new, too. Emma stood very still. "He gets scared in new places," she said. "Then tell me what to do," Mateo said. She swallowed. "Keep the towel over the back half of the cage, not the front. He likes to see a door." "Okay." "And don't let him eat motel curtains." "I will defend the curtains." No one laughed much, but the room moved half an inch. Carmen wrapped both hands around the mug. "I'm sorry." Carmen looked at her. This time there was no performance left to reach for. "You love him," she said. Emma blinked. "Yes." "Then of course you brought him." Emma sat very still. Carmen wrapped both hands around the mug. "I should not have made that sound small." Rodrigo looked at his wife, not surprised exactly, more like he was hearing a language he technically knew but had not practiced. He turned to Emma. "I should not have made you small," he said. Emma did not answer. He nodded once, accepting that. Mateo leaned against the counter. The edge had gone from his face, but not the seriousness. "You can't just apologize because tonight was embarrassing," he said. "I know," Rodrigo said. "Do you?" Rodrigo looked at him. For once, he took time before speaking. "I don't know what I know yet." It was the first honest sentence he had said all evening. Mateo absorbed it. Then he nodded. "Okay." Not forgiveness, room. That was all. Then Mateo went out to Emma's car for the cage. Emma followed him to the door and gave instructions in a low, tight voice. Towel over the back half, front uncovered. No grapes, no open windows. If he started clicking his beak, it meant he was nervous, not hungry. Mateo listened to every word. Rodrigo drove him to the motel. He came back alone 20 minutes later, cold air still on his coat. Before we sat down again, Emma stopped me in the kitchen. What did she mean she owes me an apology? I told her the least amount I could and still tell the truth. Simple. Assumptions. Spanish. Emma did not cry.
She put one clean mug away, then another, as if the cupboard required her full attention. I sat across from Carmen. Emma sat beside me, but not close enough for our elbows to touch. I noticed. I didn't reach for her. The house settled around us. No one suggested cards. No one asked about Seville. Outside, the mountains had disappeared into the dark. For a while, we drank tea. Rodrigo rubbed his thumb along the side of his glass. "We were proud of the wrong things," he said. No one helped him make it sound better. Emma looked at the table. "My mom told me what you said in Spanish." Her voice did not break. That made it worse. "I don't know what to do with that yet." Carmen nodded. "You don't have to do anything with it tonight." "Good." "Good," Carmen said. Then she coughed once, lightly. Everyone looked at her. She closed her eyes. "Please do not all look at me every time I cough." "Sorry," Emma said. "Sorry," Rodrigo said. The room shifted again, a tiny fraction, towards something less false. Later, Emma and I washed dishes that were already clean. She stood at the sink. I dried. For several minutes we said nothing except, "Careful," and "That one goes there." "I was angry at you earlier," she said. "I know." "I still am a little." "I know." She shut off the faucet. "I don't feel simple." "You're not."
I know. The evening did not become warm after that. It became workable. Carmen sat on the couch with the gray blanket over her knees. Emma sat at the other end, not close but in the same line of furniture. Rodrigo accepted tea without evaluating it. Later, he walked Carmen upstairs when she finally admitted she was tired. Before he went up, Rodrigo looked toward Emma's phone on the table. "The bird is all right?" Emma's face flickered. "Mateo says he's mad." "At whom?" "Everyone." "Reasonable," Rodrigo said. She almost smiled. In the morning, nobody pretended the night had been restful. Carmen came down in black trousers and a white shirt, but her hair was loose. Mateo came back from the motel wearing yesterday's shirt and carrying 2 coffees in a cardboard tray. He looked like he had slept in a chair, because he had. Rodrigo burned the coffee anyway, then the toast. Emma took the toaster away from him. "I'm going to do this part." "Yes," he said. "Please." Pico was still at the motel, apparently furious but eating. Mateo had a short video on his phone. Pico on one foot, glaring at a lampshade. Carmen watched it once. "He looks offended." "He is," Emma said. "I understand." Carmen held her glass with both hands. "Not in the house, but I understand." Emma nodded. Breakfast was eggs, toast, fruit, and the last uneven pieces of flan because Emma refused to throw it away. We ate at the kitchen island. No tablecloth, no wine, no formal seating pattern. Rodrigo asked Emma about her work, not the polished question from the night before. "When you design a room," he said, "what do you begin with?" Emma looked at him for a moment. "How people actually live. Not how they want to appear? Sometimes that's part of how they live." He considered that. I had not thought of it that way. Emma looked back down at her plate. Most people don't. Before I drove home, Emma walked me out. Mateo had already gone back to the motel to pick up Pico and keep him away from the house until Carmen left for her doctor's appointment. Carmen asked if she could see the video again, Emma said. "Did you show her?" "Yes." "Good." She didn't make it weird. I turned. Emma was wearing one of Mateo's sweaters over her dress from the night before. Her hair was unwashed. Her face looked tired and unguarded. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Not exactly."
No. But maybe okay enough. That counts. She stepped forward and hugged me, front on this time, hard and quick. Then she let go before either of us could make it too much. "You're teaching me Spanish," she said. I assumed. "Not wedding Spanish, real Spanish." "Then you will need to tolerate correction." "From you? That's terrifying." "Good." She smiled. It was small. It was hers. Mateo walked me to the car. The mountains were bright in the cold morning. He zipped his jacket to his chin and looked back at the house.
"I told my father, if he speaks about Emma like that again, in any language, we leave." Good. I used to think being a good son meant translating everyone to each other, making it easier. That's a heavy job. "Last night I didn't translate," he said. "I just said what was happening." "That's different." He nodded. "Thank you for helping my mother." "Of course." "After what she said." "Especially after what she said." He hugged me awkwardly because he was not sure if we did that yet. We did. Rodrigo came outside as I was putting my bag in the trunk. He carried my Malbec. For one wild second, I thought he was returning it. "This was yours," he said. "Yes." "We should open it next time." I looked at him. He knew what the sentence asked for. Another time. A room beyond this one. The chance to be less stupid in it. "All right," I said. He nodded. "I am sorry, Patricia." "I know." "No. I want to say it without making it elegant." He looked back toward the house, then at me. "I was unkind. I was arrogant. I hurt your daughter in her own home. And when my wife was frightened, I was not useful." That last part seemed to shame him most. "You were frightened too." "Yes," he swallowed. "But other people were frightened and still useful." "I thought control was the same thing as steadiness," he said. He stopped there. "That's enough." He handed me the bottle. "Bring it back," he said. I put it in the passenger seat. "I will." Carmen did not come out to the driveway. I found that more honest than another formal goodbye. Instead, as I was pulling onto the highway outside Canmore, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Spanish. "This is Carmen. I did not come outside because I look terrible, and because I did not want to perform another apology in the cold." I pulled into the first turnout and read the rest. "Thank you for helping me breathe. Thank you for not enjoying my humiliation. I would like, when there has been time, to begin again with Emma. Not erase, begin again." Another message arrived while I was still looking at the first. "Also, please tell me the bird's name again. I should know the names of family members, even difficult ones." I sat there with the engine running and the mountains in the windshield. For once, I did not think of the perfect response. I typed, "His name is Pico. He is very difficult. Emma loves him." Carmen replied, "Then we will learn him carefully." I looked at that sentence for a long time. It did not fix the night. Emma would remember the words simple. Mateo would remember the sound of his father's excuses. Carmen would remember the tablecloth in her fist and the oxygen mask on her face. But I would remember Emma's hands steady around a terrified bird, Mateo's voice on the phone, clear and adult, Carmen letting me wipe mascara from under her eye, Rodrigo standing in the driveway with my Malbec, and no polished sentence left. No one won. That would have made it smaller. By the end, the room had simply learned who stayed steady when the table broke open. I drove east with my Malbec on the passenger seat and my phone face down beside it. Then I turned on the Spanish radio station I had turned off on the drive up. For the first few minutes, I only listened. A woman was interviewing a chef from Jerez about vinegar, of all things. Ordinary radio. Traffic, weather, a joke I missed the beginning of. Nothing grand enough for the moment, which was exactly why it worked. My mouth formed one answer before I realized I was doing it. Not loud, not for anyone. Just a small correction to the silence I had been living inside. I did not sing along, not yet. I just let the language fill the car without asking permission. This time, I left it on.